Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to your Saheli chat show. Today we'll be discussing mental health because it was Mental Health Awareness Week a few weeks ago. And with me I have Abda Khan, who's a solicitor and an author. Welcome, Abda.
Thank you, Jazz, for having me.
Welcome. And I have Susanne, who's a training consultant, and she empowers you to live your dream life. Hi, Susanne, welcome.
Hi, Jazz, thank you.
And mental health, it's such a big taboo subject, isn't it? And it's more and more common amongst like families, people, you know, and they are still not talking about it as much as they should because it's something we all have, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think as both a lawyer and in terms of the charity sort of work that I do as well, I've come across a lot of people who suffer from mental health issues, but they've buried it. They haven't talked about it. I remember, you know, I've had women in my office who've come, because of matrimonial difficulties, and then it's come out they've been suffering from mental health problems for years and years. They've had no support, they've had no outlet, they've had nobody to talk to, and that takes its toll. You know, that has a massive strain on not only that person, but
on
the
everybody
whole family,
else,
yeah.
And they could lose so much because they don't know what they're doing, and they've gone so far from like themselves. They're not connected, are they?
Absolutely, yeah. And also what you find sometimes is that, you know, with all the society's issues that we've got, sometimes other problems can lead to mental health issues. It might not be that the mental health problem arises first. It could be an addiction. And in fact, recently and we have to think about the youth here, because recently I was on a course actually, and it was talking about alcohol, gambling, and drug addiction in youngsters. You know, our young children are, you know, becoming addicted to these problems, to drugs, alcohol, and gambling, believe it or not. And who would have thought young people get into gambling? But all these issues, if they start early on, that can often sow the seeds for mental health issues later on in life, you know. So, and I think, it is very taboo, especially in the South Asian communities still. You know, and I think in all communities actually, I think if we look at it, most communities are reluctant to talk about mental health issues, or there's still something, you know, wrong with talking about it.
Yeah, they feel some sort of shame, but I think we should encourage everybody. Well, that's what we're trying to do, aren't we?
That's
to be brave, and it's okay to talk about it.
And sometimes it's only when you share that you realise somebody else has been through the same thing.
But it's really important that because I don't personally, maybe it's just me, but I don't personally like the word mental health. You know, how we phrase that somebody has mental health issues. What does that actually mean? I'm a person of definitions. You know, what does everything mean? And actually, just the definition of depression and what it actually means. There's lots of different synonyms that you can, but it's about melancholy, it's about sadness, it's about self-doubt. And it's often, there's something that I sometimes say and think that a lot of people, you know, people live their lives in quiet desperation. We talked about that last time, how, you know, people have a lot of issues and challenges that they would like to share, but they'd rather not because it's difficult to share with. We talked about the importance of talking about problems, and I'm in favor of that. But I want to point out something really important is that it's not just talking about it, it's who you're talking about it with. Sometimes, you know, I've worked with a lot of businesses and companies when now more increasingly companies are said, you know, the manager needs to discuss with the staff about their mental health, potentially how to deal with that. But a lot of managers, unfortunately, manager or not, but say, get on with it. There's nothing I can do. So it's not just talking about it, but it's the quality of the conversation that you actually have. Who is directing that conversation so that it's constructive? Because a lot of the time, people suffering in silence, they share something with them, maybe their family member or friend, but unfortunately, most people have, again, not liking the term, but mental health issues. But when you share it with someone else who's going through the similar struggles or worse, you are not going to get the response or the support that you really need. And something that I also say is that, you know, words spoken in the moment of anger are never forgotten. So people who often have depression or anxiety or any kind of mental health issue or difficulty is that it's coming from the past. It's coming from something that has happened. And it's sometimes important that I don't want people to relive moments of tragedy, but sometimes we have to go back to those moments and really think, was whatever the person did or said, had it got anything to do with me actually? And it didn't. It is that other persons, you know, the bullies or the abusers. It is those,
something that's caused it, and then it's been ignored, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But
And
then that vicious
words-
cycle begins because when it's the chain. Who is going to break the chain?
Yeah.
I've dealt, like I'm sure you have as well, dealt with families who, you know, perhaps the other parent has mental health issues. And when you are raised by someone who has mental health issues, you are likely to have that
You
too.
are. Yeah. Statistically, you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
you don't know any better.
Yeah.
You haven't seen life from a different perspective. Some people think that life is suffering. You know, isn't that quite a sad way to perceive life? So if you grow up your whole life and you think that work is horrible, relationships are difficult, world is a horrible, bad place.
Yeah.
That's all you know, isn't it?
That's
And that's
all
all
you know.
you're gonna.
Well, I think it's
kind of
important to
attract.
talk about what is depression?
Yes.
And then secondly, how can people recognise it? And then thirdly, what can be done about it? So for me, I always think depression is a sense of hopelessness.
Yes.
When you feel completely hopeless, everything seems hopeless. Nothing around you, you know, there's no hope. But you feel there's no hope left, then you know you're in that place where
And it's
you know
when you can't talk about it. You know, you can't talk about it.
So how can parents? I mean, for example, how can parents spot that in their children? That's important. And like you said, you work with the other end of the spectrum with employers. How can they educate their staff about raising awareness about mental? Not. I know it's not a nice phrase to use, but we have no other phrase to use.
No, we'll just
Mental
use
health
that. Of
issues,
course.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also in families, how can you spot if the subtle changes in your child? It's not unknown for children to commit suicide, right? And suicide is one of the biggest killers of young men. It is the biggest killer of young men in this country.
It is, yeah.
Suicide is the biggest killer of young men.
So
So
they can't find a way out of a
'cause
situation.
men
and
can't
then
talk
that's
about
what, Yeah,
it.
they can't talk
so
about
they're depressed. Usually they're depressed and they have nobody to talk to and no one to turn to. That has to change. I mean, if our young men, if the biggest cause of death in this country is suicide, and usually that's related to, some sort of depression or
Something
low
that
mood.
hasn't been tackled.
And I'm going to move to slightly perhaps dangerous waters here because I've worked with a lot of another term that I don't like, special needs, but and also with people with criminal backgrounds. But what often happens is when they share these issues and challenges with someone else, as in a professional, what often happens? What are they given? They are given medication. Right, so medication has become the solution. When I have seen and I have educated, mentored, one-to-one coached people who are on medication, they cannot perform. They don't feel like themselves. So the medication, not only does it turn them into somebody else, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
We are often dealing with the symptom. So the gambling, the drinking, the drugs, and we are dealing with the symptom or trying to suppress something. But unless we resolve the problem, where is the problem coming from? And it's painful. It's not a nice thing to do, but unless we have resolved the problem,
I think we have to be
situation
careful though,
won't
because
change.
sometimes, because everybody is individual, and sometimes some individuals do need medication.
Oh, absolutely.
And we have to be clear about that
Absolutely.
because
Definitely.
if you broke
Absolutely.
your arm, you would go to the hospital and you would,
of course.
you would get it fixed. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I'm definitely not
Yeah.
saying not to
No,
take
no.
medication.
Yeah,
Very,
yeah.
It's
but I'm
like-
just saying that sometimes
It's just a
rather
plaster.
than
Yes,
yes,
yeah.
it's a quick fix when and of course doctors are under massive pressure. They cannot coach everybody. They cannot. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's almost like I would say, when somebody's talking to you and they're a little bit depressed or not feeling 100%, it's like we listen to them, but do we really hear them? It's that, isn't it? It's almost like that.
It's like paying attention
Yeah.
to nuances of what they're saying. There's some clue in what they're saying that will give an idea about what their mental state
Yeah,
is.
I often, think, if you just smile at somebody that looks really sad, I'll always smile at people, and that smile could have made their day. You don't know what they're going through. Or if somebody sat there, say on a bench, quite sad, I'm walking in Leamington at lunchtime or something, I'll definitely smile at them.
Yeah.
And if you see a homeless person sat there, I'll even give them a sandwich or something. And sometimes that's all they need. And you just don't know. Your little gesture what it might do for that person, because we don't know.
I think that what you said about hopelessness, and like, for example, this homeless person, for example, and many others feel that there is no hope in their life or in the society. And it is often the response we expect from others to help us when we are in this difficult situation, in this difficult life situation. But then when we don't get that support, or we get the support from the wrong person, again, the quality of the conversation, that can even further escalate the problem and really make it a lot worse. So what I personally think one of the biggest solutions, yes, medication can be part of that, but it should never be a long-term solution.
No, I think, sometimes if you need it, you have to have it.
Absolutely.
But
It's something that we are doing. At the end of the day, when we talk about mental health, let's focus on the word mental. That is all about your mind, the way you perceive your environment, or the way you perceive other people, and most importantly, the way you perceive yourself. And those who have been educating you, and this is very important because, again, mental barriers come from the past. Whoever has educated you, your parent, your friend, the teachers, society, and teachers especially. Unfortunately, when I've worked in education for over a decade, and unfortunately I've seen a lot of bad practice. Teachers who say things like, "You'll never get there, you're not good at that."
Yes, that's embedded, isn't it, then?
And that one sentence sometimes defines somebody's self-confidence for the rest of their life, for their potential. When there's that burning desire, there's that potential. Everybody has so much potential.
Not everyone's the same. It depends on your individual psyche, I guess. I'm that sort of child where when I was 15, my careers advisor told me not to aim so high because girls from my background didn't go to university and they didn't have professions. And perhaps I should think about, maybe perhaps I'd do okay if I did an office job, if I got that. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to actually, because she tried to discourage me from studying law and going on. And I thought, you know what, no, I'm going to go on and I'm going to study law. Even though my mum passed away when I was 18, just months before my A-level exams, probably the most difficult time of my life. But I guess for me at that time, you have to cling on to what is going to spur you on. The thought that my mum wanted me to carry on at university, be the first child in the family to go to uni, and the fact that I wanted to make something of my life, But, it's sometimes you don't have that support. Even if it was just memories of my mum, it was still some support.
It supported you to do what you wanted to do. And,
and it's important that we give our children, our neighbours, our friends, the support that we need. We live in such a busy society. We live in such a fast world that we don't have time to check in on anyone. We don't have time to find out what's going on sometimes. What's really going on, even with our own children sometimes.
We don't sometimes. When you feel guilty, you think, do I really know my child as well as I should? Do we really have these open, honest conversations that we should be having? All these difficult conversations?
But that's a very good point, see, when we're talking about supporting each other. Again, what does that really mean? Because it can be a really, really challenging thing for a family member who sees that there are problems, but to open up that conversation, because they don't know how to help. And that's the big thing. But do we have to know how to help? As long as we don't criticize or shed our negative opinions. So listening, and just letting the person be themselves, talk without judging. There's some, people listen in different ways. They either listen to understand or they listen to judge. And when other people are sharing their challenges and difficulties, what most of the people do is, what you should do? Do this and then do this. Everybody's got advice to give.
Everybody's got advice,
But nobody can follow their own advice. So are you... if you have a lot of advice to give, great. But are you following that advice? Are you leading by example? And, even especially in parenting and whatever format, using your own life experiences to help other person and say, what, I know exactly, maybe not know exactly what you're going through, but I understand. And, using other people's life stories who have come from the ground and then risen above that situation, using those stories to help other people progress or get out of that bad situation.
Because when you've got yourself that, in that state, your faith and anything else, you can't deal with anything, can you? You can't say, have
but
faith,
you'd be surprised.
Okay.
Some people, it's difficult sometimes because some people can be very, very depressed, but to the world they're normal. So
But
they're
functioning
depressed people, so they can go to work.
Yeah.
But you know, but when they're not amongst people, they might be crying all the time. They might be down about things. And I think one of the biggest issues we have, especially in the South Asian community, is that we often can't spot, even if somebody in our family is depressed, and let alone give them advice, it's spotting it in the first place. I think that's really important, because you know, how many cases do you hear of kids being bullied at school and then committing suicide?
Yeah.
How many cases do you hear of, you know, sexual grooming, and then, you know, all these ultimately lead to depression, low self-esteem, you know, and then, you know,
it all comes down to not having these conversations, not talking at the
and somebody not spotting, and actually not even that, taking them seriously.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, take the person seriously. If they
really
say they feel really down about because they've been bullied, or they feel really down about some friendship issues, listen to them, because, you know, don't disregard, don't just say, oh, pull yourself together and just get on with it. That won't work.
It's like you could even get a friend ring you and say, you know, I feel really low today, I feel really sad, I feel something's going to happen. And you start listening to them, don't you, and think, right, she's not normally like this, but why is she talking like this today? And we forget sometimes, and we don't go that deep, but we should try to help. And I think
most of the time, something that, you know, and I, especially, obviously, we are coaching people, and, you know, most of the time people feel guilty about not doing something. So it's often that difficult conversation in a relationship. This is one of the hardest things to do, is have that difficult conversation, because everybody has fear of rejection. And it's a horrible thing, fear of being criticized and fear of losing face as well. So when you finally decide to open up to someone, you know, how is that person going to respond? And
how are they going to react? Are they going to look at you differently? You know, will they think less of you? Will you be a wimp? You know, all these things go through that person's mind, just going through, and that's what stops them from talking to people and confiding in people.
But sometimes we got to think, you know, because I like analysing the problem, although sometimes the problem can be really difficult, but what is it actually that is causing some of that depression? And that's what we really need to resolve. Because let's face it, there are a lot of people who are earning a lot of money. They have the most amazing house, they've got the 3 kids, they've got a wife, they've got a husband, they've got the pets, whatever. Everything seems fine. But then day after day, year after year, they go to work, there is struggle. And there is something that is lost. It's that connection with yourself. You know, the material, it's the material wealth, or the material is not going to resolve anything. And most of the time, we humans, and we have become such a materialistic society. We want to show off with what we've got in social media, you know, the pressures of showing, you know, I'm living a perfect life.
I've got to get that.
Absolutely. But what we really want to do is, rather than investing all the material nonsense that is only short-term satisfaction, we want to invest in educating ourselves, on feeding our mind with something that is empowering. For example, your Saheli, you know, bringing women together in these amazing events and sharing and empowering each other, that's what is needed.
It's all about the mind, isn't it? It's just learning how to control your mind.
And I think social media does play its part in causing some of these problems, especially for younger women and girls, because body image is a big issue at the moment, and that obviously leads to mental health issues.
Something like that.
And you know, every time they open Instagram, they see a perfectly made face, they see a perfect body, you know, size 0, whatever they call it.
Photoshop.
I wouldn't know.
No, and when you start comparing, it's the thief of all joy, isn't it? Anyway.
But you know, it's the pressure on girls to look a certain way, to dress a certain way, to behave a certain way, you know,
and
to succeed.
And to please men as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to look a certain way.
And there's pressures on both sexes.
Absolutely.
You know, like with young men, are taking their lives, you know, if that's the biggest cause of death in young men, that's obviously there are lots of issues there that society needs to look at, to deal with. But with young women, I know, I've got 2 daughters of my own, and luckily they're 21 and 20 now, so they're a bit older and maturing a bit now. But when they were teenagers, I used to worry about these things all the time. You know, I used to worry about what they're seeing and how it's going to affect them emotionally and mentally. You know, because I didn't want them to feel like they have to look like that, they have to be like that. You know, but a lot of girls do feel that pressure.
Yeah, and if there's anything that you know is getting your child down, or they're worried about, talk to them. It's our advice, isn't it? Just talk to them, and by talking, you can actually get to the root of the problem.
And you can get the right help for them as well, you know. And help comes in different, it's different forms, different people, different professionals, medics or whatever it might be. Every individual is different. There is help out there. There are helplines that people can ring if they do feel suicidal, like the Samaritans, for example.
Can I just say on that note, really, I think that's such an important point, Abda, because sometimes when people have tried to seek for help and it wasn't good quality, if anything, it might have made it worse. They have lost all hope in all types of therapies. So it's really important not to generalize. It's kind of like meeting a person who isn't the nicest person. Say, women could sometimes, and men as well, generalize. They have met maybe a husband candidate wasn't the best, and then now we generalize that everybody is like that. And same for men as well. We're all the same. But then what we want to do is we want to be really careful not to generalize that, I've done it once, I've tried it once, it doesn't work. What's the point? We have to let go of the stubborn attitude. And I've had to go through these challenges myself as well, and I don't have to hide that, is that when I have gone through a lot of difficulty in my life, rather than, and me trying to resolve the problem with someone else but I then have to evaluate, what actually did this person make me feel better? Was the advice actually valuable? Who is giving the advice in the first place? If it doesn't work, just try something else, because, we've got to keep trying. Life is about continuous improvement. You might have ups and downs and come up and down all the time, but sharing and supporting each other and being very selective who you spend your time with.
But it starts in the home, doesn't it? Everything starts in the home. So, when you're sitting around the table, put the phones away.
Yes.
Sit and talk to each other.
How's your day?
Ask each other, how things are going. Find out if there's anything bugging your child or your husband or your wife. Try and sort of penetrate beneath that, just that low level. Or how was your day? It was okay. Oh, great. Okay, and just go off and do it.
Yeah. So was it really okay? Because you can tell. You should be able to tell, but often we're not able to tell.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the time, especially in those situations. Exactly. It is then very easy to start again shedding advice, isn't it? Well, what about doing this? Sometimes we just want to listen and make sure that we accept the person the way they are.
What stage they're at,
We are so desperately trying to change ourselves and trying to change others at the same time. But it's a recipe for a disaster. Why cannot we just accept ourselves? This is me, this is who I am. If I had a penny for every time somebody told me that I talk too much, seriously, but then some might perceive that as a weakness, and maybe they keep telling me this or keep telling me other things and putting me down. But actually, then when you use it in a different environment, like a talk show, dedicated for talking, but there are ways that we can really unleash what is inside of us, but it has to be done in a safe environment, in an environment where everybody is accepting of each other. But that has to start from you, rather than always expecting other people to meet your high expectations or constantly fighting against your true nature. And that's another thing that we could probably create a show out of, is just accept and stop fighting and but also accept others. Because so many times, he doesn't accept me. He doesn't accept, or he doesn't like the way I am. But do you like the way he is? Do you accept him? So what we expect from others, we just like in all religions, show it yourself first. Lead by example and do it first.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think leading by example is really, really important, because at the end of the day, you can't expect your child or, the people that you work with to take your advice if you're saying one thing to them and going off and doing another thing yourself. But even in the work environment, it's very important. I think that's another thing we haven't really touched on a lot. But I think even in the work environment, it's really important that we look out for our colleagues, that we notice. We notice there are days when they're a bit down. Have we really bothered to find out what's going on at home? Is there an issue? Are they having difficulties? Can you help in any way? Yes. So I think, as a society, we are becoming too distanced from it's like, when you walk down a street, everybody's on their phone.
Yeah, no one's looking, are they?
So it's like when I look back to when I was growing up, we would all say hello to each other on the street. So I grew up north where people are even friendlier.
Yes,
than
they are very friendly.
And you know, you walk down the street and everybody knew everyone. You knew the local bobby on the beat. You know, you knew your local, you know, people from the temple, from the mosque, and you know, all your neighbours were all
You'd all
different.
stop and have a chat, and you'd notice their behaviour. If there was any change.
On Eid, you know, we would exchange food with all the different families, and then on Vaisakhi we would get food from the Sikh family. So this is something that I feel sadly has died away now.
Yeah.
We don't really find out what's going on with our neighbours, our friends, our work colleagues, and I think that's such a shame. And I think we need to try and get that back a little bit.
I think very true, and sometimes we have to, you know, think, especially having done a lot of coaching, is when I ask people, and this is a very important question to ask, what actually makes you happy? Most people really struggle to answer this, aren't they? Because most of the time we can easily list the 20 things that make us sad and make us angry and make us frustrated.
Don't forget the positives, right? Because that's when you only go further downhill, when you don't look at the positives that you've got. You may not have one thing in your life, but be grateful for the 9
it's
you
like
have
the
got,
half
right?
full, not half empty
Yeah.
glass syndrome, isn't it? Yeah, it's half full, not half.
Thank you so much, ladies. That's all we've got time for today. And we've touched on some great topics here, and hopefully, you know, this will help a lot of our audience out there. And thank you very much to the audience for watching, and we'll be back next week. Vaigu Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaigu Ji Ki Fateh.